I can go ahead and pray for us if that's all right. So first, we're really thankful to have Hal here today, both for those who are in attendance and those who are live streaming. And watching later, I hope this is beneficial as we think about this partnership. So let's go ahead and pray, and then Hal can come up and do his spiel. Father God, I come before you today and I give you thanks for this opportunity to learn more about partnership with this important ministry in New England. Father, I pray that you would bless our conversations, let any questions be answered clearly and helpfully, Father, and I pray that we would be able to, no matter what happens, be able to be an encouragement and a source of prayer, perhaps, for this network of planting churches in New England, Father. And just bless our conversations today, bless our time together. And I ask this all in your Son's holy and righteous name. Amen.
Well, thank you, Tony. I'm glad to be here today. I just wanted to share just a little bit about myself and what I do, and then we'll go right here into the presentation. I want to let you know that this presentation will be the first time we've actually done this in a local church. We normally do it at our headquarters, which is in Northborough, Massachusetts, where we'll gather typically 30 or 40 pastors and leaders. So I feel quite privileged to be able to share this with you guys tonight. So let me just say I've been married for 30 years. My wife's name is Sharon. I only have one wife. It's always been that way. And I have two kids. One is 26. He's a graduate of Talbot Seminary. He's actually a staff accountant right now, hoping to get his PhD. And I have a daughter who's 24 years old, and she is a marketing rep for Husqvarna. The chainsaw company. They do all kinds of landscaping. And she's in Florida, and my son's in California, and here I am in Maine tonight. So I tell my wife, I don't think our kids like us, to live so far away, but she always gets mad when I say that. But I'm really happy to be here. My official title is the Associate Executive Director for the Baptist Churches of New England. And my particular role or responsibility is to serve our Executive Director. He has given me mostly what we call the ministry arm of the Baptist Churches of New England. So under me, I have a team of people who work with church planting, church revitalization, partnership development for individual churches. I have what we call restorative ministries. These are everything that deals with community engagement, and a number of other kinds of ministries that are under my team, including ethnic ministry and so forth. So my job is really to run most of the ministry elements of what we do at the Baptist Churches of New England. What I'm going to share with you is what we share with any prospective church or prospective pastor or leaders. In fact, we also share this with churches who are engaged in our network, but they just want to learn more. They want to know more about who we are. This presentation that we do is typically 2.5 hours, but I think I could squeeze this into 4 hours. So actually my hope is that I can try to just kind of run through the bullet points of information so that we can mainly spend time, if you have specific questions about anything, then we can unpack some of that as well. The only thing is at 7 o'clock, we were supposed to do this last week, but we had snow and all that. I actually have a meeting with a church. It's only a 10-minute meeting, online meeting at 7. So we'll take a break at 7, and then at 7:10, we'll go on. I think, Tony, you'll take it from there for those just brief few minutes, just touching base on some things, and then we'll just jump right back into it. Let me just tell you, the most important thing to us is that all of us in the network of the Baptist Churches of New England is that we do one thing, and that is make disciples. That is the heart of our network. In fact, this is what we encourage all of our churches to do, is to fill the Great Commission that Jesus has given us, which is to go and make disciples, teaching them to obey everything that our Lord Jesus has commanded us to do. So this is front and center. It's kind of, it's like the old football coach who said to his professional football team, this is a football. He started with the most fundamental thing, and that is the most important thing to us. In fact, one of the things we talk about is how do we not only make disciples, but how do we multiply disciples? There is a need for more disciples in New England. Of the 14.5 million people in New England, roughly half say they are not very religious. Less than 4% of New Englanders are part of an evangelical church. There are 3 times more atheists and agnostics in New England than evangelical Christians. And the 5 least religious states in the U.S. and 5 of America's most post-Christian cities are located in New England. It's a very sobering place in terms of where we live. There is a need for people to know who Jesus is and to follow him. And in order for that to happen, we need to have healthy reproduction. And so our goal in the network is to come alongside of churches, not to replace the local church, but to lift the local church up and help them to think in ways in which they can multiply disciples. And we always want to see new believers, we want to see new ministries, new leaders, new churches, and new missions emerging. Now, there are specific ways that we help local churches accomplish their mission. The first way that we do that is just simply by partnering. We come along, we do it in a lot of different ways. We bring other people to the table, we bring other pastors, we have staff on our team that comes and helps a church in a whole slew of different things that they might be dealing with. It could be if a church loses its pastor, we help them find a pastor. We don't tell them what pastor to get, but we give them tools and we walk with them and help them. We partner sometimes with grants. We do this particularly with new churches. We actually do this for churches that are actually in the outward expression of evangelism. We help with that. We partner with just connecting other people who have gifts and talents and abilities that can be brought into the local church by other local churches that are a part of our network. We also do this by equipping. So a typical week at the BCNE is we offer 2 to 3 webinars every single week that not only pastors or leaders can take advantage of, but we also have church members as well. And it's a variety of topics, everything from children's ministry to how to start a church to how to share your faith or how to share your story with somebody else or how you can go about discipling someone or engaging in a spiritual conversation. There are a myriad of topics. We have typically in a week on a webinar, we'll have anywhere from like 10 to 70 people that will participate in it. And then we post it online and we'll have at a minimum 3 times the amount of people who actually viewed that teaching. So if we had 70 people watch a particular webinar live, we'll have over 200 people participate in that. We not only do it online, we also do in-person trainings. We do it not only in Northborough, but we also go to a variety of places throughout the 6 states of New England, and we do training typically not only just with an individual church, but oftentimes we do it with a cluster of churches. We also do this by encouraging. We have a team of people who just take pastors out and take them out to eat, spend time and pray with them, talk through some of the things that they're going through, personal challenges or ministry challenges. A lot of times churches don't realize that the pastor himself needs added support and encouragement. Not that he can't necessarily find it in the local church, but there are some unique challenges and pressures and things that the pastor or leaders in those churches face, and we come alongside to do everything we can to encourage them. These are the 3 things that we primarily try to do: partner, equip, and encourage. Now, we have a thing called Impacting the Future. What I'll do, Tony, is I'll send you a copy of this. We don't have it on the presentation. Normally, we would pass that out to you. But there are a number of different objectives that we have involved of what could we do together as a network to really impact New England and actually go after lostness, see people come to Christ, see more disciples. What can we do? And this involves really restoring and revitalizing churches to get back on that mission of multiplying churches. We do that with new churches. We plant a number of churches, new churches, every single year. We have goals for that. We'd like to see at least 25 new churches being planted every year. We've been close to that. Sometimes we've exceeded that number of new churches that we've planted. We have a certain amount of people we would love to see as collectively come to Christ through evangelism and outreach activities. We actually will help people who are going through that. And by the way, my computer says that the battery is running low. So, so we might want to get a power button here. But what we do is we have a series of goals. I'll send them to him, and then maybe, Tony, you can distribute that. You can see what area would our church be interested in adopting. We don't ask people to adopt all the goals. We might say, hey, here's one thing that our church really is passionate about. We have some churches in our network really passionate about foreign missions, even raising up a missionary within their church. And they say, that's a goal that we would like to adopt. So what we do is we ask people to think about, what is your church passionate about? What do you feel like your church should be doing? And then we would like for you to let us know what it is that you're trying to further the ball for kingdom expansion here within the network. And then we have the question, do you know anybody else who might be interested in joining our network? Right now, I have probably between 60 to 70 churches that I have not followed up with at this point who have actually expressed an interest in becoming part of the Baptist Churches of New England. In fact, I'm talking with someone right now whose maybe potential full-time job would just be talking with churches who have similar alignment, belief, so forth and so on, with us, who might want to be a part, and then help them find their place of engagement and get the support and encouragement that they need. So that's one of the things that we talk about when we do this. Here's some quick facts, just a little bit about who we are. We're known as Southern Baptists. A lot of times you might hear the word Great Commission Baptists, really, again, focusing on this idea with disciple making. There are nearly 50,000 churches, Southern Baptist churches, that are in North America. Of course, that's America and Canada as well. There are nearly 400 churches in the BCNE. I think we're at like 389 or something like that. So we're getting close to that. And then our ministry facilities are actually on the property of Luther Rice, who's considered the forerunner of SBC mission cooperation among churches. And I was telling a little bit about the story when we were around the dinner table earlier tonight, that Luther Rice, who was originally a Congregationalist with Adoniram Judson, went over to Burma, and on their trip over there, they became convinced that once a person came to faith in Christ, they should be baptized, which was not the belief of the Congregationalist. And so they told the Congregationalist church this is what they believed, and that they had become Baptists, and they said, okay, great, we won't fund you in this missions adventure that you've been on. And Luther Rice came back to America in the late 1700s, and he began to go up and down the eastern seaboard on his horse, talking to churches about supporting foreign missions, which at the time, most local churches did not believe in supporting foreign missionaries. They actually believed that if God was sovereign, the heathen would lead the heathen to Christ, and somehow they would find him without their help. But he said, no, it's the direct opposite. We're to make disciples of all nations. And so that was pretty much his message for about 30 years before he died. He also believed in this idea that churches that come together can do a whole lot more than they could do individually. And this is really one of the foundational understandings of who Southern Baptists are. When he died in 1825, it was years later before the Southern Baptist actually was formed. And when it was formed, they took these ideas that Luther Rice had espoused during his lifetime and said, let's build a network of churches that will be about the global mission mandate of Jesus, and let's do this together. Let's bring the best of who we are. And Luther Rice homestead is right where the Baptist Churches of New England headquarters is at. In fact, I sold my house in Connecticut, and I am living on the second floor of the Luther Rice house. And we have another missionary family that's right underneath me on the first floor. And across we have a lodge, and that lodge used to be the stable of Luther Rice, and now it's converted for mission teams that come in all during the year to help a number of churches. And it's just really an exceptional property, but it has a rich and varied history. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about our history and how it all came together. Baptist churches really weren't formed here in New England until the 1960s. And those churches that actually did get started here in New England, eventually they aligned with a convention that was in Maryland. But the first time that they actually came together and said, let's be a convention or let's be a network of people that reaches New England, didn't happen until actually 1983. And in November, we'll actually celebrate our 40th anniversary here. Now, the sad part is, between the 60s and the 80s, most of the Baptist churches that were started were because Southern transplants came up to New England, got jobs, and they found that there were no Baptist churches up there, and so they sort of formed their own Baptist church. It was almost like their own little club, and so these kind of speckled around New England. But they really didn't have a heart for mission. It was more or less, let's kind of stay within our cultural milieu here. But after 1983, there was a very specific desire for these churches to come together to say, hey, New England is a pioneering area. It has increased secularization here. Most people do not know Jesus Christ, and we need to get on that mission. And since that time, in the past 40 years, that network has grown from just a few churches to now, like I said earlier, almost 400 churches. So it's been significant growth for us, and we continue to grow even at a faster pace at this point. One of the things that we talk about, and I think is a real strength of our network, is churches that voluntarily cooperate together to synergize the mission of Jesus. We do this together. So with Southern Baptist, and we'll talk a little about this a little bit more, we believe in the autonomy of the local church. So each church has its own polity. They make their own decisions about how they do church. But even though we have all these independent, I'll put in parentheses, Baptist churches, they make a decision that they're going to come together and they're going to participate in a greater mission so that we can do more. And there are a lot of examples of how we do more, but it always starts with this idea of togetherness. We have a thing called the cooperative program, and maybe if I were to turn this brief video on, would we be able to hear it on the screens or no?
You would have to push the top button on the left so it's muted on the computer. Like F5 or 6, something like that.
All right, I'm trusting you. Uh-oh. Nice.
I was baptized here, married here, ordained here. I got a sense of the importance of missions.
We came to this church when I was an infant, and I stayed here until I graduated from high school. So this really was the church here in Pawnee that really molded me. I had a neighbor when I was about 6 years old that started taking me to rural ambassadors on Wednesday nights. And I was sitting just kind of right over there. I just remember hearing sermon after sermon about the gospel.
The foundation for why we ended up going to the mission field. We started here.
There was just always this stirring in my heart. And I started thinking, I think I want to do missions.
Jerry Rankin was speaking, and he said, have you ever asked God why He's allowed you to live in a place where the gospel is so available? Could it be that that's His way to prepare you to go and to share with others?
As the Bible says, go and make disciples. And so maybe we should assume that we are on the missions, called to go, unless God says not to. And I heard that, I just kind of sat back. So we went in 2001 to Thailand, and that is where we really planted our lives. Those first couple of years, obviously, were very hard. Anybody we shared with about Jesus, they didn't know who He was. They never heard of the name of Jesus. Really, it was hard. realize how many people do not have a clue who the is.
My primary assignment is to be a lecturer at the Baptist Theological Seminary in Malawi. And ultimately, our big goal is to see Malawian Baptists becoming a mission sending place to other parts of the world.
The Fulani are the largest nomadic people group in the world. There's about 30 million.
To be a Fulani is to be Muslim. And they just can't see separating themselves from the faith of their fathers. We're seeing some groundwork laid that more and more are beginning to believe. Few in this village or few in that. In the past, historically, they are the champions for Islam. It is our prayer that one day they'll be the champions for Jesus, spreading Jesus across the same area that their ancestors spread Islam. I remember as a little kid, there would be the offering plates coming, so you'd hold your hand out and get money from mom or dad to put into the offering plate.
Growing up as a kid, I can honestly say the offering, it wasn't something that I really thought too much about.
I don't know that I had any understanding of where all it went, cooperative program or missions or anything of that nature, but had no clue it would ever have anything to do with me personally.
We grew up hearing the words cooperative program, but as far as the global impact that makes, we had no idea. I had no idea as a 9-year-old kid.
As that plate is getting passed, just realizing the money that goes into that plate is being used for kingdom purposes.
What you do matters, and we are just representatives of the larger body of churches that are in your attendance. And if we don't give, none of us can go.
The realization that the people whom these seats, their faithful giving, it makes a difference in the lives of the people that need to hear about Jesus.
It's worth it to see people step out of darkness.
And we've had the opportunity to see people's lives changed. Thank you so much for giving.
So that we can continue to be a witness for Jesus among unreached people.
When you put that offering in the plate week after week from places all over the nation, joining together to do God's work across the whole world.
That's what the cooperative program is. It's everybody working together to make Christ's name known among the nations.
We could not serve if it weren't for your giving. And we just want to say thank you for that.
So that gives us just an idea. Our churches come together, and out of the 50,000 churches that we do have, we send almost 4,000 missionaries around the world to share the gospel. This is what the cooperative effort, or we call a cooperative program, does. Where one church says we could never send a missionary out on our own, well, the group of churches can do that, but it not only just supports missionaries, it supports seminaries, Bible schools. We do a lot with hunger relief. We are the #1 volunteer agency for the Red Cross when there's ever any major disaster literally in the world. We have a large volunteer base that goes and serves people because of who we are, and we do this together. There's so many things I could tell you that are just so amazing in terms of how we help the poor, and we give hunger relief, and we're there in times of disaster, but we're always there to share the gospel, to make disciples, to start new churches, and to re-energize and revitalize churches. And it all takes with this spirit of voluntary cooperation. That is, working together. And as churches, we willingly do it. Nobody's going to have a club and hit your church over the head and say, you got to do this. No, it's a decision that you make, that you think is important. Secondly, we collaborate. That means we get together and we do that on a local level with churches. We do that on a regional or state basis. And we also do that on a national basis and an international basis. So every tier we're set up for this idea of actually collaborating together And then thirdly, we generously contribute together, and each church decides how they want to actually contribute together. And working together for us, this is evidence of a loving and productive family of churches that make a difference. There are two things that are really important to us that make a difference. It's about our relationship with each other and about following Christ's mission of making disciples. And so we don't want to be all these independent like churches or independent leaders. We want to be together like brothers and sisters. We want to know each other, because if we know each other, we might like each other. If we like each other, we might trust each other. If we trust each other, we might do anything for the sake of the gospel. And that's what's important to us, is making sure that our relationships are deep and that we do this out of a heart of love, not because it's a mandate, but we have a greater mission in sight, and that's why we do it together. So why don't we take a break here, and hopefully that's not too much, but we'll jump into the other part, and hopefully we can go through it pretty quickly.
All right, guys. Yeah, he just has to take a question from some other church, I guess. So, but in the meantime, while we wait for him, I actually do want to say for the questions, I think probably it would be best for the live stream, because I know there are some watching the live stream at home, and there are some that will watch it as recorded later. But probably be easiest when questions happen, that I'll try to get Hal to maybe repeat it into the mic, the question that he hears as a summary, rather than having everybody rush down, and just so that people can understand what questions are asked. So I'll say that. I will give, depending on how long it takes, maybe some time for questions now. But I do want to note, with this BCNE involvement, I really am grateful. He stressed the cooperative program in that video, and that didn't explain all that it is, but I had sent something out with some explanation. But it is personal to us, in the sense that, by the way, I'm sorry that it was 6:30 rather than 7. A lot of that was Hal has to get home tonight. So, it's impacted us directly, the cooperative program giving. Most of it goes towards missions. So most of the money that we would give would go towards the cooperative program and ultimately towards missions. But it goes beyond that. And even our own family, we went to Southern Seminary, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, and I think it was a fantastic seminary. But I will tell you that half of my tuition was paid for by churches that contributed to the cooperative program. And especially when we were in seminary, and I'm sure you know some of the story that we had a miscarriage that wasn't covered by insurance, and it basically bankrupted Danielle and I. And I am essentially 100% positive, if it wasn't for cooperative program giving, that we wouldn't have been able to afford me going to seminary any longer. I would have had to drop out of seminary. So it impacts this partnership impacts people significantly. So, any questions or thoughts while we're waiting for him to kill the time already for him? So.
Did I understand correctly? There's 40,000 churches under the SBC?
50. Yeah.
50,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
All, not just in the United States, though.
No, United States and Canada. Vast majority of the United States. Yep. Southern Baptist Convention is the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S. Some of the Southern Baptist stats, I will tell you, sometimes can be. In the South, it's extremely common that Southern Baptist churches have the opposite situation of us, in the sense that it's extremely common that Southern Baptist churches have triple the membership of the attendance, or even quadruple. But that's a problem they're addressing over time. So some of the statistics it's huge regardless. It is gigantic. And that's part of why they're able to give so much to support New England ministry. And, seeing all this growing, all this growth of 400 churches is a result of financial investment of the 50,000 churches, primarily in the South as well as the West. There's a lot of them in California. Yeah. Yeah, so we would have to give a minimum of $500 a year towards partnering with them, and that would be the minimum is not like an admission fee. The minimum is basically they want to see that we have an investment in it. But a lot of Baptist churches, they tend to kind of sub-tithe, essentially. And we wouldn't. Almost certainly we would never get to that point. Maybe that would be a future discussion many years from now. But it's common that Baptist churches, especially in the South, will give basically their entire missions budget is given towards the cooperative program, if not in the vast majority of it. So like we budget a certain percent, effectively a certain percent towards missions, and most Baptist churches, they just do it to the whole group so that it funds all that, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess the $500 minimum, but is there any other criteria by which the number above that is based on? Membership or?
No. It's just any church, it's 500 minimum, and it's really just trying to. They didn't used to have that minimum, from my understanding, but they just want to see that there's a degree of skin in the game.
Anything above that is strictly volunteer.
Correct. Yeah, that would be entirely. There's no requirement. Yeah, and even that's newer. It's not unheard of. I worked with the Maryland Baptist Convention in Maryland, and in the association we are in, probably a third of the churches gave absolutely nothing, which was not ideal. And I would not encourage, we don't want to be takers that don't have any involvement. But yeah, it tends to be the case that bigger churches give more, and which I loved. I love seeing the way in which in this connection of Baptists, you see churches supporting one another. Those who have plenty oftentimes try to give other surplus to support those who have need. And I think that is the most beautiful part of Baptist cooperation. When you see not a competition, not a perspective of we're going to steal each other's members, which does happen in Southern Baptist contexts, but in that mentality that we want to help one another survive. We want to help one another not just survive, but be on mission. I beat that horse to death.
My question.
Okay.
Can we identify other local churches near us and name the board members?
Yeah. Somebody asked to identify the local churches. Ray, you pulled that up before.
Yeah, it's on the, I know, but the main, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
We can send that link out.
We can send a link out. Ray said we can send a link out. That there's a list, and I know it's a growing list. It's about, yeah, I think Ray said it, we think it's about 22. So it tends to be more in the cities. Anyway, I know there are multiple in Portland area, and there's I believe one in Augusta. But they're listed online. It's not hard to find it. So yeah, the far north is Caribou. So any other questions while we're waiting? He's better to answer questions, I know, but we want to respect your time. Anything else? Any thoughts? Is Thomas Memorial in Lewiston still Southern? There was one in Lewiston, I think that was it. Ray's looking at Thomas Memorial in Lewiston as Southern Baptist. And by the way, we wouldn't have to use the term Southern Baptist. They own that term, Great Commission Baptist. I probably wouldn't use the term. Most Baptists and most Southern Baptists in New England that I know use BCNE, the Baptist Churches in New England. So. Yes. So there's one in Lewiston. Anything? He will get to that, I know, in more depth, but I can give some answer. There's a question about how basically the money is divided up. So that is a decision that is made. We would directly support the Baptist churches in New England. And then every year they make a budget decision, like our churches, and they decide what they send on and what they keep. And we would be invited to be part of making that decision. We would have a certain number of members that can be part of that. Typically, it's the case that most Baptist state conventions do about 60% that they send on, and they keep 40%. Now, I know the BCNE gets money from other conventions because of the fact that it's just such a small, a lot of the churches are church plants, a lot of the churches are not financially independent in the way that you would hope they would be. So most, again, state conventions, they would send 60% to the cooperative program, and they would keep 40%, but even that 40% would be used towards things like paying the salary of Hal, running a lot of these things that was mentioned, these trainings. It would be used towards planting churches. They have money to help plant churches, as well as give grants to churches, potentially even like our church. And then that 60% they're sent on, if it's 60%, it's usually somewhere between 50 and 60. It goes to the cooperative program. And within the cooperative program, there's a division that goes to the International Missions Board, which is what basically they're advertising in that video. And so the majority, basically it's like 60% of that 60% goes towards the International Missions Board. And then about 30% goes towards the North American Missions Board, which supports church planting in the U.S. It can be like, really frontier areas. So it can be supporting it in areas like Canada, in perhaps Toronto. There are North American Missions Board churches that have been planted in Maine. I know that for a fact. And then the last 10% goes towards generally theological education as well as administrative. So that the rest of that 10% would include like paying towards tuition, so I could go to seminary, for example, or let's say that one of the children in our church eventually goes to Bible college and wants a good Christian education. A significant portion of their tuition will be paid for through that cooperative program. Does that answer your question? Anything else? Okay, so.
A perk that is different versus the denomination that I serve in was when missionaries come back to visit family and stuff, they don't have to go and visit all the different churches that supported them to try to raise funds. That's one benefit of
Yeah.
the association is that's all right. They can start when they're at home, they can be home. When they're on the field, they can be.
Yeah. Danielle noted that one benefit of cooperative program giving is that missionaries don't have to return as frequently to raise support because they're directly supported by the cooperative program rather than having to come and collect money from different churches. And I think I will add another benefit towards that end is that you have people that know what they're doing, that are overseeing missionaries, that are able to make sure that the money that's given by each church is being well used. So we wouldn't have to, we had made an uncomfortable decision last year with a missionary that was awkward and we had to navigate that. And, and I'm essentially 100% positive that decision would have been made wisely far beforehand if that missionary was going through the International Missions Board. George. Yeah. I would know that very personally. So George asked if there was any a program within the denomination that provide retirement insurance, healthcare type stuff. And the answer to that question is yes. There is a program called Guidestone. I would know that personally because I get my life insurance through Guidestone. And Guidestone, because the fact that the Southern Baptists are so focused on cooperation, Guidestone will often include people that are pastors of churches that have a similar faith and practice. So I actually had to apply, because our church is not part of the SBC, to continue getting my life insurance through Guidestone. They also offer health insurance. It didn't work out for us to get health insurance, but a lot of pastors benefit. And they have some kind of pension plan. It's not in the way that a lot of pastors get, but there's some help towards it and some help with investment. So they don't fund that in the way that they fund some other things. But I mean, I feel like I'm getting very, very, very affordable life insurance because of Guidestone. Good question. What? Mark? No, I pay for it some, but yeah. Oh, yeah, that's true. A random fact, though, as I was reading some historical math, evangelical Christians used to be against life insurance. That's just kind of a random historical thing. We shouldn't be, but anyway. Okay, cool, awesome. So, yeah, here's the man of the hour, the man that are able to. There were some questions about budget, and I assume that you'll get into how the money is used. So, awesome. Thank you.
All right. Here we go. Are you guys still engaged here? Hey, by the way, if you get tired and you do the head bob thing, you know what I'm talking about? Don't fight it. Just take a nap. 20 minutes later, you'll feel better. Then you might learn something when we get to the next part. All right, so here's our priority. It's the local church. That's who we serve. The local church is autonomous. So, as we said, the church decides what the church does in terms of doctrine and practice. But we also say they're not isolated. We're in community together. The church is the driving force of mission. So again, our job is to come alongside of you. Churches are connected locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. We are organized into 7 regions and or associations of churches in New England. We have regional coordinators that are in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Rhode Island, and in the city of Boston. This is what we call our regional coordinators. We just had a meeting with them just the other day, and they work with pastors in those particular areas. There are also what we call associational leaders. We have one in Western Mass, Connecticut, and the one that you would be interested in is there's the Maine Baptist Association, and the key leader there, I don't know if you've met him yet, but his name is Mike Nerney. But I'll connect you to him if you're interested in getting to know him. Our structure, we have ministry facilitators and consultants. So you name the topic, we probably have someone who can walk with you and help your church in a particular area. We have a ministry team booklet. It probably has about 30 names on the back of it of all these different areas of ministry that can be helpful to you, and it'll come with what I send you. We partner with the North American Mission Board and the International Mission Board. So again, that's for the U.S. and Canada. It has an agency. And then the IMB, that's a part of where you heard the story of the 4,000 missionaries. And that agency just focuses on qualifying, training, and sending people out that churches say, hey, we feel like this person is called for missionary work. Our structure, we partner with 6 seminaries and several other ministries on the behalf of our churches, just for an FYI. Engagement, partnering in the mission, we do a lot with pastors. We actually have pastor groups, so if you were a part of what we were doing, you would have the access to meeting with other pastors in Maine, learning from their experience and hopefully from their encouragement and support. We also have church engagement, so we have all kinds of equipping and partnership opportunities for people in the local church if they want to get involved or it makes sense for them. And then we also have financial engagement, so we'll get a little bit about what you were talking about, Tony, just a moment ago. We have cooperative program giving. Every church that we have in our network, we encourage them to give 10%. Not every church gives 10%, but we encourage them. This is the baseline, and as you know, 80% of whatever is given stays in New England for ministry, and 20% goes on to greater missions, which we call the cooperative program. And there are a number of ways that people can give. You can give online, you can mail, so forth, but that is for the church to decide. And we have a number of churches say, hey, you know, we're going to start at 2% because we fund our own missionaries, and then eventually we want to get to 4%. Again, that's up to the local churches to how they might want to voluntarily participate. We actually have churches that give more than 10%. It really depends on what the church wants to do. There are options. This is what most churches do. When they give a contribution from their church, they know that 80 is here and 20 goes. Some churches, they say, you know, we want our contribution to mainly stay right here in New England. That is an option, but we prefer the global aspect of giving. And then there's also over and above giving. We have different special offerings that take place that relate to a few other things. There are two main offerings that we do, which is Lottie Moon, which is a missions offering, and we also have an Annie Armstrong offering, which deals with home missions and the things that we're doing. And then there are some other offerings that people have, like you care about the homeless, or you care about hunger, you care about adoption, you care about a number of, there are other ways that you can participate in giving as your church if you want to do over and above. We also have a foundation at the Baptist Churches of New England. The foundation is a separate entity, and its main job is to raise money to put into the budget of the Baptist Churches of New England to do more ministry work and to fund some of those initiatives. One of the things that we have seen is with the increasing secularization here in New England, there will be a need for additional funding. If the trend keeps happening and there are less disciples, less people following Jesus, if churches are diminishing, there certainly will be a need for a long-term funding strategy. So this is one of the ideas for us in terms of a foundation. So we have a long-term strategy of funding ministry. What we would like to do with that foundation, I won't go into detail, but it's mainly to fund any operational expense or salary so that 100% of every dollar that comes in from a church will go directly into ministry. There will be no overhead. And we're working towards that. For us to get there, it's roughly going to be about $15 million. At this point, in our stage of the foundation, we have raised $2.5 million, and we'll continue to raise money from outside sources, and some do come from our local churches. We have 19 different endowments that relate to ministries, and right now, because of what we have raised, we've been getting a 5% return. We actually, every year in perpetuity, at this point, give $100,000 towards more ministry in New England. We hope that number will continue to increase. There are other kinds of giving options that we've seen. You can see what's on the screen. People have given probably any or all of these things that are listed. We also have church facilities that are donated to us. We don't want to be in the building business, but sometimes what we're able to do is when a church closes, and sometimes it's not a Baptist church, it sometimes might be an independent church or another denomination, they will come and approach us, and we look for a leader who might come in and either restart that church or revitalize the church that's dying. So we actually, with that regional approach, are able to actually help advance some churches. We have some pretty cool stories in which those have worked out very well. Here's the thing that we hope for, is that we can build relationships with other pastors and churches, and we really try to facilitate that. We also really try to encourage every church to connect into the greater mission, not just think about their local church and what the local church, but some of the bigger regional and national and global initiatives that we have. And then, of course, we tell every church, if you have a problem, please, reach out to us. Recently, we had a tragic accident that happened in one of our churches in Vermont, and the pastor died unexpectedly, and we were able to, it was just a terrible situation, I won't go into it, but we were able to come in and help that church get back on its feet, and I'll probably tell you some of the details of that, but it was, I don't know if most churches would have survived what took place at this church. So we're an added layer of support and help to the local church, and we also have, counseling hotlines and other kinds of things to really support our pastors within the network. And all this really comes from the most part, are from our churches who give, and we're able to do all these different things to really help them. And our goal is to love and serve you as you are expanding His mission, as you are multiplying disciples here and around the world. Now, in terms of our beliefs, hopefully you guys have taken a look at this. I think some of your elders have already looked at this. This is an evangelical Orthodox belief system. If you haven't looked at it, I'd encourage you to do that. It's a Baptist faith and message. We have no compromise on the essential beliefs. The Bible is God's Word. Jesus is God, salvation through faith. There's a number of things that we have that are close-handed issues because we stand for the truth. But we do understand that churches have some differing viewpoints, and we believe that people can disagree on that, on some of the secondary issues, like for eschatology or the end times. And, some people say, I don't know if I'm a post-millennial or an amillennial, or, some people say I'm a pan-millennial. I know it's all going to pan out in the end. Jesus is coming back, So we give freedom for that, and we appreciate the diversity that's even within our own network. But we do have a relentless commitment to keep the focus on Christ's mission. Here's our expectations. We ask that every church deal with conflict biblically. That means that there are times when churches are at odds with each other. We even know churches within the church, their own family has conflict. We ask that biblically you deal with it immediately, graciously, and proactively. Whether it's pastor to pastor or it's church to church, or even if it's an internal thing within the church. When in doubt about, let's say, the BCNE or the SBC denomination, don't assume the worst. Now, I just want to say, when you have 50,000 churches, and you're part of a very big denomination, you can find one church that's a wacko church, or some church that stands for something stupid. Don't assume, like, we're in agreement with that local autonomous SBC church. So sometimes people write and say, do you believe this? And we're like, no, we don't believe that. We don't subscribe to that at all. Don't believe everything that you read, but if you do have questions, feel free to contact us. We'll let you know where we stand on things. In fact, that meeting I just had, a church said, where do you stand on this? I said, this is where we stand. I put it in writing, and I answered the question for the elders of that church, and they were satisfied with that. And I'm glad they approached us to talk about what they're dealing with. As often as you can, we say, speak well of other churches. This is what Paul says in Philippians, Even if the church has poor motivations, we're rejoicing in the fact that Christ is being preached, and we want to encourage that. And as churches, we want to model cooperation. So if a church wants to be a part of the BCNE, how does a church affiliate? I just point you to this link here at bcne.net on how you can affiliate. You've probably already taken a look and read through that. It's not extensive, but we do get to, on the front end, we do get to know the pastors, and we've spent a lot of time together. We've talked a lot on the phone, and we have all of our information on the website, and we're willing to come like we are tonight to answer any questions or give you any information that you hope to receive tonight so that you can understand, so you feel good that if this is something you're supposed to do, that you'll do it. And we're okay if the church is like, hey, maybe we should hit the pause button here, and maybe we shouldn't go forward. That's all right. You think and pray about it. But if it's something you're supposed to do, we'd be glad for you to do it. And if it's not, you just feel like, no, we shouldn't do this, that's okay too. But we would love to have you if you feel like this aligns with who you are and you want to be a part maybe of a bigger and broader network. So for an existing church, what is required? A member church engages a network. They contribute a minimum of $500 a year. There's a reason for the $500, because we actually spend $500 on each church with some added benefits. I'll talk about that later. You actually will get a benefit, which costs us like $493 or something like that every year for every pastor in our network. So this basically just covers costs. It doesn't even extend our mission. But we ask that you do that just to cover costs. But as you think about the percentage of giving, we would like for your church to think about what you can give so that we can accomplish some of these bigger agenda items together. And we also ask that you stay faithful to the standards that we've set and the expectations that we have, which are found in that link. One of the things I would encourage you to do is go to that website, look at all the different aspects of resources that are there. There are even more than what is even listed on the website. That's why relationship is so important. You might have a question about something. We might even have the ability to help you with something that may not even be listed. But we have staff that are available. We have fellow pastors who are gifted in different areas who can come in, teach and train and help you. We have a variety of grants, a lot of different grants that relate to outreach, ministry expansion. If there's an emergency, we have part of our foundation, we've raised money for if a disaster were to happen in Poland, like we can pull up like $5,000 to immediately start getting something going. We have budgets for that. Even for capital projects, part of that is we do loan money for churches for specific projects that they're doing. So that there are a variety of things. Even if a church is getting started, there are grants for their launch and for other projects that they're doing. So a variety of that. We have all kinds of trainings and consultations are available to you only if it makes sense for you and only if you need it. You can access it or request it. And then there's some other denominational advantages. We have a retirement program that is available to any paid staff of a church, life insurance, and some other things that are accessible. So just for our process in terms of having greater meaning and being a part of the BCNE, we encourage churches to come to these gatherings that we do. This is the first one we've done, like I said, individually, but attend one of those meetings. We ask that they adopt one of the goals, the ministry goals that we're doing collectively and collaboratively together. We ask that you engage in a network offering. So like we do VBS trainings. I don't know if you do VBS, but maybe that's one thing that you can take advantage of. Or for you, a pastor gathering or something else. Just find a way to engage and get to know other people that are in the network. You can partner with another church. In fact, the guy we were talking about, Josh, earlier today, he's like, hey, listen, if Tony, he needs me and he needs to know a little bit more, I'll walk with him for a few months or a year, and I'll kind of show him the ropes. So, like, partner with another church. Or we have some churches that are in very rural areas, and they're just getting started, and you say, you know what, we'd like to help that church, in northern Vermont. Well, we can show you or tell you some of the needs that are available, and you can immediately begin a missions partnership, even with a church here in New England, or even outside of New England. And currently, we're doing international partnerships in Europe. So there are a lot of things that you can do in terms of partnership. Encourage other people to connect. So there it is. Explore, adopt, engage, partner, and encourage. So this is what we do with our group. We ask them, what's the insight, connection, or understanding that they gleaned from today? What are you getting out of this conversation? What goal are you interested in? What gathering or trainings would help you? That will come in the packet that I'll send you, Tony. And is there anybody else you think could use a community that's on mission with us? And then some final instruction. So there we go. It wasn't 2.5 hours. How's that? I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for converse or any questions that you might have. Okay.
All right. So, by the way, first off, while he was gone, I thought the amount that it goes to the cooperative program was higher, so I apologize for that misrepresentation. So, what questions do we all have? Or anybody online? So. Go ahead.
I heard you mention that the organization certainly accommodates differences in opinion, perhaps in eschatology and those kinds of subjects. I'm curious how the organization responds to reform ministries.
Okay, so Peter, just to clarify for those live streaming, Peter had a question about how the BCNE responds to reform doctrine, basically. Would that be an accurate presentation of it?
I'll just tell you, the majority of our church planners are Reformed. And I would say that there's probably a good number of our churches that believe in Reformed theology.
And Tony shared that with us.
Yeah, sure. Hey, you're off the hook. You're welcome.
Not everybody's Reformed here, but yeah, but I mean, I am. But
Yeah.
Anyway, cool.
Yeah, and there are plenty of churches that you can connect with that are
Yeah.
Reformed.
Cool. George?
Yeah, you indicated that there were no Baptist churches in New England until the 20th century. I'm assuming,
Southern Baptists.
what you mean is Southern.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we know American Baptists have been here forever. And Conservative Baptist, there's a lot of different Baptists, but I was talking about Southern SBC that are part of our network. Yeah. 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 So some people, I was in a church. It was American Baptist. I was with the pastor yesterday. This was up in Haverhill. And he's like, hey, you should look at some of our documents. He's like, the governor of Massachusetts, he signed when we constituted as a church. His name is John Hancock. Have you heard of him? I'm like, yes, I have. So there a lot of history in this place. But relatively, as Southern Baptists, we're newer here. But we are growing significantly.
What other questions do we have?
One of the dangers that I see is if we got to a point where we might be donating 10% of our income budget to you or to the convention, that we could just sit back and think, we got it done.
Agreed.
You guys are doing it.
Agreed.
Can you reiterate in the mic?
He said one of the dangers is if a church gives 10%, then basically they could relegate that 10% as, okay, that's our ministry engagement.
Yeah.
And there are some churches, I'm going to just be honest with you, who have fallen into that trap. Hey, we give 15%, but they're not mobilized. That's why we talk with every church and say, you have to be engaged. We want you engaged in your local community. We have people who will help you if you don't know how to engage in ministry. We want you making disciples. This is our mandate. This is why we're doing this together. What are the ways you are participating in missions? How are you partnering with the church in New England or around the world? So we know that is a danger. We do. And we really encourage people not to just think of cooperation as giving, because it's so much more than that.
I do want to note, just personally real quick, on the 10% thing, that for those who are curious, that is something that some Baptist churches do. I suspect even the majority that's their aspiration, but not always a requirement. And I think that, personally, I feel like I would love to see us go beyond 500 at some point. I don't think that point is now, but there's never been a discussion among any of the elders, including myself, about doing 10%. So that maybe is an aspiration that maybe some of you could think about, but there's not been any discussion about that, and there was no requirement of discussion about that at all. So,
Yeah.
So I have a follow-on question. You have certain requirements, including affirming the Baptist faith and message, the 500, the commitment to engagement. How do you navigate, and you also talked about how you urge engagement of the churches. How do you hold that intention with being a Baptist and honoring the autonomy of the local church?
Mm-hmm.
How does that play out?
Yeah. So, what I'm understanding your question to be is, how do we help churches stay accountable to these things and still respect the autonomy of the local church? So the way that we do is we realize we're not a pope, we're not a top-down structure, so we have to trust the local church. But our job is to cheerlead them on and to encourage them. But if we're in relationship with every one of our pastors, and our pastors understand this cooperative idea, we find that our own pastors encourage the other pastors to do the same thing. It's not perfect, and it would be great if we could keep some people accountable, to that mission. But again, we have to respect the local autonomy of the church. It's a good question. All these have been good questions. Yeah.
Following up on that, would there be a point at which the Baptist churches in New England would disassociate with the church because of size?
Yes. His question was, would we ever disassociate with the church, let's say if it were a belief or doctrinal issue? And the answer is yes, absolutely. For instance, if a church in our network advocated homosexuality, we would disassociate from that church. That would be one example. Yes.
No, just my familiarity in the Baptist world, I do know that the executive board, whatever it's called, the SBC, is in the process of removing a large church that has appointed a woman pastor. That basically a married couple are co-pastors, and they literally last week they were removed from the SBC.
Less than a week ago, actually.
Yeah.
So it does happen. Yes.
Wondering if in the history of this local church, if we've been approached in the past about joining, and if so, why haven't we considered it?
You mean joining the SBC? Well, normally, we have someone reach out to us, and you reached out to us and said, hey, we'd be interested in entertaining this conversation. We're honestly not like proactive going to churches and saying you should join what we're doing. Well, I think we should. Honestly, I think we should, because I meet a lot of independent pastors of churches, and they're isolated and alone, and they're struggling, and they need help, and a lot of the help that they'd have to pay for a consultation, or they have to pay for a training, or they don't have the money or the resources. And I'm like, man, you should be a part of us. We can help you with some of these things. I feel for you. Now, I want you to know, in the past, if a guy will call us and say, hey, I'm a bivocational pastor and our church is struggling, we're not SBC, we notice that you're doing this, can I be a part of this? We always say yes, unless there's some crazy whack. But our answer is yeah, we're going to serve and help them. And we have done that. I actually... and I can say this on the record, because I just spoke to our executive director this morning, but we actually have talked about a position within the BCNE that would be an assimilation director, who would actually take a church that's expressed interest, like the number of churches I mentioned earlier, and walk with them and say, are you really truly interested? At what level would you like to engage? And help them find a meaningful place of contribution within the network. He was in agreement with me. I actually have already written the job description for what this role would be. Now I just have to find a way to fund that role. But I'm in agreement with you that I think we should have someone who just works with individual churches and helps them, or screens them, for that matter, to see if they should be a part of what we're doing together. Okay.
Are SBC churches typically more cooperative?
Our SBC church is typically cooperative. So if I said it in a comparative, from my own experience, basically, I grew up in a Bible church, so I didn't grow up as a Baptist. When I entered into the SBC world, it was a whole different world. Our church was proud of the fact that they were independent. In fact, they were part of the Independent Fundamental Churches of America, IFCA. We're independent. We don't. But man, that church ended up having some problems. They ended up closing their doors. It was a thriving church at one time, but they didn't have any help from the outside. So when I look at even my own experience and what our church did, and then becoming a part of the Baptist world, I see a lot more cooperation. Let me just say this. Since probably April of last year until now, we have had one or two churches from around the U.S. who have come to New England to say, what could we do to partner with the local church here? Can we help them with the construction project? Can we help support one of the pastors financially here? Can we do outreach events and help that church in reaching their community? So just even on that aspect, on a partnership level, we've had tons of churches who are doing that, even from outside of New England, who have an interest. I just met with a church probably 4 days ago that said, we want to partner with a church in New England. Give us a church that we can help that might be struggling or having a difficult time. So I'm seeing that cooperation. I'm seeing it through giving. I'm seeing it through helping churches. I'm seeing it through a variety of ways. So there are always going to be churches. It's all about them. They don't care about other people, and they're not going to be cooperative. You're going to have it. When you have 50,000, you're going to have plenty of those. But the vast majority, I feel, are cooperative and collaborative.
I guess this is where I was going with this line of thinking. We're from New England, and it's probably, I've only ever lived in Massachusetts and Maine, and it's, if I can talk about it this way without offending anybody, independence and individualism is on steroids in Maine.
Yeah, it's a high value.
Yeah.
I
I guess you could say that.
What he's saying is,
I guess what it is that we separate ourselves, even as a body of believers.
yeah.
And sometimes I think, even myself, we need to get kicked in the pants a little bit. No, I mean, seriously, you need a volunteer for that? If you're not wearing steel toes.
Let me interrupt for a second. What he's saying is that Mainers, for the most part, are independent, and that sometimes we separate rather than come together. Is that okay? Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up, because honestly, this is part of the reason why I've been praying and thinking about this, because I think that it's something that hurts ourselves. You know, I love Maine, like crazy, and I think there's some beautiful values, but I think that's something that would just be such a support to churches up here. And you should be up there. Yeah. I'm just saying, you know, as an outsider, you know, it surprises me the level of independence among churches around here. And I think that is part of what Jeff had said is part of the reason why. And I think that actually breaking away from that in partnership with other gospel churches will be a beautiful act to see Maine really survive for the Lord. Because I think independent Christians and hyper independent churches is a great way for missions and ministry to die in Maine. Yeah, or in any part of New England.
Yeah, so if I might finish, because I get easily sidetracked too. When Tony started talking about this affiliation, I thought it would be a good idea because as a congregant, it gives me somewhere to go. I've seen a lot of independent churches in Maine get the wrong guy. And this is what I mean. They hire somebody churches hire somebody to do the work. They don't help, they hire him to do the work. And sometimes, and probably far too often, that guy goes the wrong way. And I've seen it cause church split after church split after church split. And I'm truly hoping that this affiliation would help alleviate that with a little bit of friendly interference.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I like this. I do like a lot of the other things that this affiliation offers, but for me, that's kind of like a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping this goes well and that we actually take our own personal Christianity much more seriously in this community.
One of the things that we offer, and that is let's say if a church can't work out a conflict, and sometimes it can get really mean and nasty. So they're like, why don't we call one of the staff at BCNE help be a mediator or a moderator to help get to the other side, whether it's the expectations of the pastor or somebody has sinned egregiously or something like that. And in many ways, we can help mend some of those fences or work out something agreeable. It doesn't always work, but we can help some of the worst case scenarios not come to pass. Again, we only do that if the church requests it. And we understand that fine line of the autonomy of the church.
By the way, I do want to note, I will honestly know, Mike, when he says the church, he's meaning the congregation, and that is a
Yes.
distinct thing to note, even though we're talking about the denomination, that even the process by which we would join the BCNE, the elders would have no greater authority in the process of joining the BCNE. It would be a church vote.
Right. He couldn't call us and say, our church is joining. Because we would require that the elders' leadership, or whatever the polity is in the church, come to some kind of vote, however that's made, because some churches it's an elder decision, but most churches it is a congregational decision. And so we require that because we're not going to, we believe, again, the church must decide.
I have a question online. I'm interested in how they can help churches like us in Maine make more disciples of our local community and support our church in general.
Oh man, I love that question. There are a lot of different ways. One of the things that rather than just necessarily, I could tell you like programs or events or things, but one of the things that we would love to know is, let's say this church says to us, this is what we're good at doing. This is what our church would like to do. If this church has a specific offering of service, we can, because we know the churches, we could say, let us direct you to this church in May. And you could really serve this church in this way. So if a church, we get requests all the time, sometimes a church says, do you have anybody who would come up here for a day and just pass out flyers because we're going to do this children's event? Right? And then if this church said, you know, that's something we'd like to do. We'd like as a congregation just go out for a day. Or we have someone say, do you know anybody who just help us paint our Sunday school rooms? It could be something physical like that. We get requests all the time, and it's so neat because we see churches, it's not just money. A lot of times it's service, helping one another in the mission that they have. So if you guys said, we want to do this, we could connect you. Or we could say, here's 5 churches. I want you to contact these 5 because all 5 of them probably could use what you want. You decide which one you want to partner with. Heck, you might want to do all 5. I don't know. But we can do that. But there are hundreds of ways.
George had a question as well.
Yeah, I just got 2 quick little things. One is, would the BCNE discourage a local church from supporting missions outside of the SBC?
Absolutely not. His question is, would the BCNE discourage any local church from supporting a mission outside of the BCNE? And I'll just include SBC as well. And the answer is actually no. In fact, we actually encourage it. We want churches to be generous.
My follow-up is Scranton Memorial Baptist Church in Portsmouth still functioning?
I don't know, but I have an app. I can tell you in a minute. Because I have all the churches, basically literally right here at my fingertips. What it? Okay. Well, I don't know if you know, but I was. It's a long story. I won't get into all of it, but I was a volunteer just over 2 years ago. I used to oversee church planting in New York. Then I started a church, and then our executive director, Dr. Dorsett, said, "Hey, would you champion church planting for us?" And I did that as a volunteer, and then built a team. And then he said, "We have a multiplication team at that time called a growth team. Can you head that up?" And then I did that half-time and then full-time. And now I basically do whatever he needs me to do, now in the role that I have. So and that all happened really relatively quickly within about a year. So I've just moved almost a year ago to Massachusetts. So I'm still trying to learn all of the churches we have. And so normally what I do is if someone asks me, Terry's been here, our executive, for over 30 years. I mean, we have people who born and raised in New England, they're on our staff. They have long history. So it's real simple for me to make a phone call or have a conversation and get you an answer.
I can print out a list. It's pretty easy to find online. I can print out a list of the BCNE churches in Maine from online. I can have them available.
Yep, and Mike Nerney, I'll give you his name as well.
We'll get it taken care of. If it's possible to do it before somebody can.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll just try to do that.
If you read the comments on the online, there's a link where you can go to see all the churches in Maine.
Perfect. Great.
I'll print it out.
Okay. All right, you guys have any other questions?
I have one. How can we be praying for the BCNE, regardless of what decision we make?
Okay. One's personal. Our executive director, Terry Dorsett, his wife, Kay, has pancreatic cancer.
Oh, no.
And so she's going through chemotherapy right now. Recently Terry said to me, he said, hey, if wherever we are in this process, I may have to take 3 months off and be with Kay. So just to get me ready in case some of the other things happen. So we are praying for her. And so I'd ask that you would pray that God would heal her supernaturally. That's what I've been praying for. We all know that once people get pancreatic cancer, for the most part, it's a death sentence. But so far, since her diagnosis, she's actually survived longer than the average person from their diagnosis. But it's still a struggle for him, obviously, as anybody would know. And then I think on the BCNE level, we are growing as a network, and we're having some of the pains of that growth. I would ask that you guys ask the Lord to give us wisdom as we continue to try to serve churches faithfully in what God's asked us to do.
How about I assume that pretty much people have opportunities to ask questions, and the elders would be happy to answer any other questions in the future. But maybe we should close. Pastor Ray, maybe you could come up and pray, close our meeting today.
Father God, we thank you for this time we've had tonight to hear from Hal and to consider what it might mean for our church to affiliate with Baptist churches in New England. And I pray, Lord, that you would give us wisdom, as was asked with regard to the BCNE, that you give us wisdom as a church, Lord, to discern your will here. Help us, Lord, to be of one mind with regard to this possible opportunity. And pray, Lord, that you'd help us to be faithful to you and the mission that you've put us on, Lord, to make disciples, regardless of the specific decision we come to, Lord, that we would continue to just be faithful here in Poland, Maine, and in our neighborhoods, Lord, and among our families, Lord, just to give the gospel. But, Lord, I just pray that you'd help us in this decision, that you'd carry us along, Lord, and Lord, that we would act in a way that pleases you, Lord. And we pray all these things in Christ's name. Amen.
And I just want to say one thing. I'm thankful for you guys. Even if you're not a part of the BCNE, I'm glad you're in Poland, Maine. I'm glad you're making a difference. I'm glad you guys are a light here in this city. Keep doing that. And even if you don't join, we'll still be friends, But if you want to be a part of it, again, I just reiterate, we'd be happy to have you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.